Hello everyone, welcome to Solid Cells classes. Today we are going to discuss the CAT 2019 Slot 2 verbal section. Now before I start, I want to tell you something very interesting. Very often I've heard students coming to me and telling me that the verbal section is very tough, it's not comprehensible and they were not able to answer questions and so on and so forth. And when I ask them what is so difficult about the verbal part, the most frequent answer that I get is there are words that we couldn't understand, or there are meanings that we don't understand, and so on. So today I'll teach you a technique by which you don't need to understand or know the meaning of each and every word. It is good enough if you know the meaning of some of the words or the most commonly used words, right? And that technique is called the rule of keywords. The rule of keywords. Now we'll see what that means. So what we'll do is, as we go through the passage, and we go through the passage only once, as we go through the passage, we will list down certain keywords that we will use to answer all the questions. We will not come back to the passage at a later point in time. So let's get started. The first passage starts off by saying the magic of squatter cities is that they're improved steadily and gradually by their residents. So what does this mean? This means that there is a kind of city, and let's assume that we don't know the meaning of squatter cities. So there is a kind of cities called squatter cities, and the characteristic of that city is gradual improvement. Gradual improvement. So squatter cities and gradual improvement are the keywords from the first sentence. Gradual improvement. We can also say gradual change, gradual transformation. All these are related words. They're one and the same thing. So gradual change or gradual improvement or gradual transformation means the same thing. To a planner's eye, these cities look chaotic. I trained as a biologist, and to my eye, they look organic. Now, notice that the words chaotic and organic are kind of antonyms here, meaning that they have different meanings or opposite meanings. Chaotic means something which is very random, which has no order, and organic means something which is very ordered, regimented, which grows gradually, like we call organic growth. All organisms grow steadily and gradually. So organic means there is some amount of order, discipline, and growth. So let's note down the word organic as well. Squatter cities are also unexpectedly green. So the next characteristic that is mentioned is green, which means eco-friendly or environment friendly. Environment friendly. They have maximum density. So maximum density is the next characteristic. Maximum density. Maximum density also means they're very compact. That means there are a lot of people who are living in a very small area of land. And if you notice, the next sentence elaborates that point: 1 million people per square mile in some areas of Mumbai. So Mumbai is given as an example of compactness or maximum density. Now, notice one thing: when we are listing down the keywords, we will also list down the relevant examples that are given to highlight or illustrate some of those points. People get around by foot, bicycle, rickshaw, or universal shared taxi. So this is a characteristic of a very densely populated city. From the first paragraph, we've already understood that there is something called squatter cities, and some of the characteristics of these kind of cities is gradual improvement or transformation, organic in nature, environment friendly, and very compact. Let's move on to the next para. Not everything is efficient in the slums though. So here there is a slightly negative statement. Not everything is efficient. So in the first para, everything that was told was very positive. But in the second para, we are told that not everything is efficient. That means there can be or there is some degree of inefficiency, at least in certain slums. In Brazilian favelas, now note the word favelas, we might not know the meaning of the term, but we can understand that it is trying to illustrate the concept of slum. So it is nothing but a kind of slum. In Brazilian favelas, where electricity is stolen and therefore free, people leave their lights on all day. So not everything is efficient, and Brazilian favela or Brazil is an example to illustrate this point. But in most slums, recycling is literally a way of life. So recycling is another characteristic of these kind of slums. So we note this point down. So we will note recycling as the next point, the next characteristic of these kind of cities, recycling. Now note that recycling is related to eco-friendliness, because when you recycle materials, you are keeping the environment clean. The Dharavi slum in Mumbai has 400 recycling units and 30,000 rag pickers. And then the rest of this paragraph goes on illustrating how recycling works in Mumbai, Vietnam, Mozambique, and some other cities in Asia and Latin America. So this is just an illustrative example. So recycling, and this is a characteristic, and the examples given are Mumbai, then Vietnam, Mozambique, and cities in Asia and Latin America. So these are the illustrative examples given. In the next para, it says, in his 1985 article, Calthorpe made a statement that still jars with most people. Calthorpe was a person who made a statement that jars with most people means it doesn't resonate or annoys, or people don't agree to his statement. That is the meaning of jar. The city is most environmentally benign form of human settlement. Now note the word environmentally benign, which is nothing but eco-friendly. So we can write Calthorpe trying to illustrate or strengthen this point that cities are environmentally friendly or eco-friendly or environmentally benign, whatever you call it. Each city dweller consumes less land, less energy, less water, and produces less pollution than its counterpart in settlements of lower densities. Now, this is again a very interesting concept and this is illustrated in more details in the subsequent sentences, is the fact that when you live in a very compact area, you have you have less resources or limited resources. Therefore, you cannot be wasteful. So you have to be more efficient in usage of the resources. So this is the recurrent theme or the underlying theme which is being discussed in this paragraph. So if you are living in a very compact area, you are very conservative in nature. You don't waste land, energy, water, and therefore you are contributing positively to the environment. So next we see the example of Green Manhattan, which is cited as an example of a green city. Um, New York is the greenest community in the United States. So again, as an example of eco-friendliness or greenness, we have the example of New York. The key to New York's relative environmental benignity is its extreme compactness. So as I was explaining, that when you're living in a very compact or densely populated area, you have limited resources and therefore you cannot afford to be wasteful. So you try to conserve resources, you try to use less of land, less of water, and therefore you become more efficient, and you become more environment friendly or more eco-friendly. So the next line illustrates this further. Placing 1.5 million people on a 23 square mile island sharply reduces their opportunities to be wasteful. So this is what I was saying. You cannot be wasteful. He went on to note that this very compactness forces people to live in the world's most energy efficient apartment buildings. So when you have limited resources, you become more efficient in usage of those resources, and therefore you become uh, eco-friendly, you become energy efficient. Urban density allows half of humanity to live on 2.8% of the land. Again, this illustrates the concept of compactness. Consider just the infrastructure efficiency. So everything is used in a very conservative way. So you become energy efficient, you become infrastructure efficient. So the concept of efficiency comes in very strongly. The concentration of population and enterprises in urban areas greatly reduces the unit cost of piped water, sewers, drains, and so on. The nationally subsidized city of Manaus in northern Brazil answers the question of how to stop deforestation. Answers the question of how to stop deforestation. So, stopping deforestation means you are trying to preserve or conserve the environment. You're trying to prevent tree cutting, and Manaus is an example of that. So, stopping. So, this again is related to eco-friendliness. So, stop deforestation. An example is Manaus, which means preserving the environment. And how do you do that? By providing people decent jobs. By providing jobs. They can afford houses, gain security. 100,000 people who would otherwise be deforesting the jungle around Manaus are now making such things as mobile phones and television. So they are engaged in productive activities. Of course, fast growing cities are far from an unmitigated good. Fast growing cities are far from an unmitigated good. So there are some inefficiencies in fast growing cities which is mentioned here. They concentrate crime, pollution, disease and injustice as much as they contribute to business and innovation, education and entertainment. So these are the positive side of fast growing cities and these are the negative aspects: crime, pollution, disease and injustice. But if they're overall a net good for those who move there, it is because the cities offer more than just jobs. They are transformative. Now, if you remember in the first line itself, we had encountered the keyword gradual improvement or transformation. So this is reinforced in the last paragraph as well. So there is a gradual change, there is a transformation, there is improvement happening in the slums as well as the office towers and leafy suburbs. The progress is from hick to metropolitan to cosmopolitan. Now we note down this point also in the last para. For fast growing cities, we have crime, pollution, disease, injustice. And we have on the positive side, we have business or jobs, innovation, education, and entertainment. So we have got the list of keywords which we have noted down, and with this set of words we are going to answer all the questions now. We are not going to go back to the passage. But before I do that, let me just remind you that the reference of fast growing cities is not exactly equal to uh, the squatter cities. Fast growing cities can be a subset of the squatter cities, but not all squatter cities are fast growing cities. So there might be some squatter cities which are already quite matured in itself, and some which are very nascent, which are starting to grow. So with that, let's go to the questions. From the passage, it can be inferred that the cities are good places to live in for all the following reasons except. So let's look at the options. Number one, have suburban areas as well as office areas. Now this is nowhere listed in the passage. We have not listed this down in any of our keywords. So let's park this and see the next option. Help prevent destruction of the environment, which means conserving the environment or eco-friendly or green, which has been mentioned consistently in the passage. So people will want to live in a place which is eco-friendly, so it's a good place to live. So this is a reason for people to live in cities. So this is definitely one reason. So this cannot be the answer, because the answer is asking for an exception. Offer employment opportunities. So it is clearly mentioned that cities offer decent jobs. So this is jobs. It is clearly mentioned. So people will want to stay in a place which offers good jobs. So this is again a reason for people to stay in cities. Contribute to the cultural transformation of residents. Transformation is a very clear theme that has been mentioned in the passage. So there is a gradual change, improvement, all of that. So this is again a good reason for people to stay in the cities. Now we go back to option number 1. Have suburban areas as well as office areas. Now, you might argue by saying that yes, this could also be a good reason for people to stay in cities, because they might prefer to stay in a quiet suburban area, and they might prefer to work in a more bustling industrial area. So, if these areas are segregated, then they'll have best of both worlds. But this is an assumption that it is nowhere mentioned in the passage that this is a reason for people preferring to stay in cities. So therefore, you cannot assume that this is true. So this is not mentioned in the passage. Therefore, this is the right answer. This is the exception, because all the other three are clearly mentioned and we have listed them down in our keywords. So option 1 is the right answer for this question. Moving on, which of the following statements would undermine the author's stand regarding the greenness of cities? Undermine means weaken. Weaken the author's stand regarding the greenness of cities. Now let's see the options, which means that which of the following, if true, would actually weaken the author's argument that cities are green. So option number 1, the high density of cities leads to an increase in carbon dioxide and global warming. This definitely is a good reason to weaken the author's argument, because it has been mentioned that in certain cities there is pollution, there is contribution to pollution or global warming. So this is a reason which can weaken the author's statement. Let's look at the other options. Over the last decade, the cost of utilities has been increasing for city dwellers. Now, cost of utilities has nothing to do with greenness. Cost of utilities can increase for many factors. It can increase due to government policies, due to forex rate change, due to crude prices rising in the international market, and so on. So it is not related to greenness of the cities in any way. So this is irrelevant. So this is not an option. The compactness of big cities in the West increases the incidence of violent crime. Now, crime, yes, is mentioned, as a negative characteristic of some of the cities, but crime has nothing to do with greenness. Again, greenness is eco-friendliness. Crime is a different thing. So, again, this is irrelevant. Sorting through rubbish contributes to the rapid spread of diseases. Now, though disease has been mentioned as a negative factor in certain cities, it is not clearly mentioned that sorting of garbage leads to rapid spread of diseases. This is not mentioned in the passage. You might infer it, but this is not mentioned in the passage. And if this were true, then definitely we can't call that to be a very green city. But this is not clearly mentioned in the passage, so therefore we cannot assume this to be true. So this is also not true. Now the only option that we are left with is option 1, which is logically correct and is mentioned also as an indirect uh, negative contributor in certain cities. So the high density of cities leads to an increase in carbon dioxide, and global warming definitely would weaken the statement that cities are green. So this is the correct answer. Moving on to the next question. In the context of the passage, the author refers to Manaus in order to. Now you see the reason why I had asked you to note down the examples given. Now if you remember, Manaus was listed down as an example for stopping deforestation or preserving the environment. So now let's look at the options. Explain where cities source their labor for factories. This is not mentioned anywhere in the passage, ruled out. Describe the infrastructure efficiencies of living in a city. Infrastructure efficiency is mentioned, but it is not in connection to Manaus. Manaus was not mentioned as an example of infrastructure efficiency. So this is ruled out. Explain how urban areas help the environment. Yes. Stop deforestation means uh, preserving the environment or helping the environment. So yes, this is one of the reasons or the main reason, not one of the reasons, this is the main reason for citing Manaus as an example, help the environment. You might get confused with the last option, promote cities as employment hubs for the people. Now, yes, Manaus did mention that the way to stop deforestation was to provide jobs to people. But as I said, providing jobs was the means of stopping deforestation. It was not the intention. The intention was to stop deforestation, and therefore helping the environment or stopping deforestation is the right answer. So we don't choose 4, we choose 3. Question 4. This one says, according to the passage, squatter cities are environment friendly for all the following reasons except. Again, environment friendly and except. So of the 4 reasons given, 3 would be a good reason for cities to be environment friendly, 1 would be not. And let's see the options. The streets are kept clean. This is nowhere mentioned in the passage. Uh, you can argue that yes, if the streets are kept clean, then definitely the city is green and clean, so it is eco-friendly. But it is very clearly said according to the passage, so you cannot assume anything which is not told in the passage. They sort out garbage. Yes, it is very clearly mentioned that garbage sorting happens in many cities. They recycle material. Yes, recycling material and garbage sorting are very closely related. So that actually prevents, garbage from piling up and keeps the city clean and green. So definitely both 2 and 3 contributes to the greenness of the cities. Their transportation is energy efficient. Yes, it is mentioned that they preserve the resources, so they're very careful in the way that they use energy. So the transportation is energy efficient, correct? And this definitely is a contributing factor to the greenness of cities. So your transportation is energy efficient, you produce less pollution, definitely contributes to the greenness of the city. Now we come back to option 1. Their streets are kept clean. Now this can be a contributor, but it is not mentioned in the passage. So therefore, this is the exception, that we are looking for. So according to the passage, their streets are kept clean is not mentioned. So this is the correct answer. And note that streets being kept clean are also not appearing in our list of keywords. The last question. We can infer Calthorpe's statement still jars with most people. That means most people do not agree. Most people do not agree with Calthorpe's statement because. Now we go back to the list of keywords that we have noted, and Calthorpe was noted for environment friendliness. So Calthorpe's argument was in favor of cities being eco-friendly or environment friendly, nothing else. So we'll look at the options and we'll see which of the options relate to that. So the first option says, consider cities to be very crowded and polluted. This is not what Calthorpe stated. Do not consider cities to be eco-friendly. Calthorpe precisely talks about eco-friendliness. So yes, this is the correct option. Option 2 is the correct option because Calthorpe talks about cities being eco-friendly, and people who do not consider cities to be eco-friendly will not agree with Calthorpe's statement. Let's look at the other options as well. Regard cities as places of disease and crime, not stated by Calthorpe. Do not regard cities as good places to live in. Now this is a very generic statement, and Calthorpe was very clearly talking about eco-friendliness. He was not talking about any generic concept like cities are good places to live in or anything like that. He was very specific about eco-friendliness. So option 2 is the correct option. Now you can see that we just used the keywords that we had listed down to answer all the questions. We did not go back to the passage at all. Okay, so this is what I'm trying to illustrate, and we'll do this in the subsequent passages as well.